our flight had been cancelled because of bad weather. Take two. Again. Don't fly. Oh God. Hello again. As you can see, I'm home, and the trip actually finished about 7 or 8 weeks ago. It's now middle of February, but I've only just got around to recording this. I should have recorded it when I got back, which was I think the 28th of December, because now the details are a little bit hazy, but I'm just going to talk you through the final leg of our trip, which was coming home from Disneyland Paris after a 3-day stay. And the coming home was even more disastrous than the journey out there. It's been a disaster. So picking up where I left off, I got back to our hotel quite late on that last night. Must have been around midnight. Sarah had gone back earlier and I'd stayed on in the park to do some more rides, and then I had planned not to stay right till closing, but it ended up that by the time I'd done my extra rides and gone through the shops again, I came out just as the fireworks were finishing. So I got back to the hotel very late and very cold, and then I just really felt like I needed a bath. I think because I was so cold. Oh no, shush, Missy, shush. Shush. Oh God. The postman just came, which is kind of embarrassing because I've got, shush, there's a parcel box like right by the window, and I've pulled the curtain closed a bit so the neighbours can't see me sat here in these ears. But if you come right in to the garden to do the post, you can quite clearly see me sat here like this. So, yes, thanks postman. Embarrassing me. Where was I? So, as I was saying, I got back really late and then decided to have a bath to warm up, and just because we had to get up early the next morning, and I wanted to wash my hair and stuff and knew there wouldn't be time in the morning. So I had a boiling hot bath, completely overheated myself and got out like bright red, and then remembered I had to do the skip tax. So if you're not familiar with this, when you go to France as a tourist, you're allowed to claim back the tax you pay on certain purchases. So I think it doesn't work for food, but for other stuff that you bought on your trip, you're allowed to claim back the tax. And if you look at the bottom of your receipts, there'll be a little note about skip tax and how you apply for it. So what I had to do late at night was take photos of all of my receipts and then register on this website to submit the receipts, which was a bit of a faff. And then at the end of it, I think my refund was going to be, say, like €30, which in my head I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get like a couple of £100 back. But I actually hadn't spent that much. So it depends how much you've spent as to what you get back. But that's something I would recommend doing if you're on holiday in France. So after I'd sorted out all the skip tax stuff, that there was an option also whether you want to be paid back with cash or for it to go on your credit card. And for some reason I chose cash, which then meant that at the airport I would have to go and like collect the money. But anyway, after that I had to do the online check-in for the flight, which I think was fairly straightforward. I never understand why you need to check in before you're even at the airport. Like in my head, check-in should be to announce like, yes, I'm here and I'm ready to go on the flight, not something you do the day before in case you don't make it. But anyway, I did the check-in, and by the time I'd done that and packed my bags, it was like 2 a.m. before I actually got to bed. And I can't remember the exact timings for this, but I think we had an airport transfer booked for like 8 the next morning. So yeah, I like set my alarm for 7 and went off to sleep. What I didn't know was that at 3 a.m, Sarah had woken up to find that our flight had been cancelled because of bad weather. So luckily she was able to book us onto another flight that left later in the day. And yeah, she sorted everything out while I was still asleep, which was lucky for me because yeah, I would have just panicked and not known what to do. So when I woke up to my alarm, I had a load of like WhatsApp messages from her, like with the series of events like, oh, our flight's been cancelled, don't worry, I've booked us onto the next one. So our airport transfer was still going to be at 8 a.m. So yeah, we got ready and left for the airport. And then when we got there, we were too early to check in for the next flight, because instead of being at like 11:30, which is when I think it was originally scheduled, it had now moved to, I think, 2:30 or 3:30. So anyway, we had a bit of time to kill at the airport. So we went to the McDonald's there for breakfast, and then there wasn't really anything else to look at. We thought maybe there'd be more shops airside, but when we did actually check in and go through, there was just nothing there. And then yeah, we just had to sit around for an hour or so, or yeah, I can't remember at this point how long we had to wait, but it was just quite disappointing because I was hoping they would have a Disney store, and they didn't. They had like a news agents that sold like sandwiches and stuff. That was about it. So we had a long, boring wait at the airport. Oh, and also when I went to the skip tax thing to collect my cash, I found out I wasn't allowed to have cash for some reason, and I had to have it back on a credit card. But in order to do that, I had to then download the skip tax app, which I was trying to avoid doing because my phone was so full of different apps. There's like hardly any memory left. So that was a bit of a faff trying to sort that out. So if you are doing skip tax, I recommend just downloading the app straight away and yeah, putting in your credit card details, because it was just a big waste of time, like doing it on the website and then going to the desk and like still having to do the app. So we finally boarded our flight, and we'd actually been separated. We'd originally booked our seats together, but on the new flight they hadn't been able to accommodate that, so I was in the middle of like 2 strangers, and then weirdly Sarah had an empty seat next to her, which they could have given to me, but by the time we realised there was no one sat there, I was already sort of sat between these other people and couldn't be bothered to move, so I just stayed there. And once we were on the plane, the pilot did an announcement to say we had like an hour to wait for takeoff. Because of the adverse weather, it was affecting like all the planes basically. I think it was heavy fog or something, but it was preventing like lots of planes from coming and going as normal. So we had to queue for ages before we could take off. And then the actual flight was fine. Yeah, that was really quick. But then when we arrived at Heathrow, we had to wait again because there was no gate for us. So the plane landed, and then we just seemed to sit there for ages. And then eventually they drove out some steps to us, which was quite exciting because I haven't been on steps off an aircraft for I don't know how many years. Usually you just pull up to the little walkway thing and go straight through to the terminal. But yeah, they drove some steps up to the side of the plane, and we had to get off, not in the middle of the runway obviously, but somewhere not near the terminal, and then we had to wait for a bus to come. And because we'd been sat on different parts of the plane, we were on like different buses as well. So I had got off first and taken my little bus ride to the terminal, then had to wait for Sarah to get on her bus to the terminal, and it just took forever at this point. I think by now it was sort of like 4 or 5 o'clock, and we were supposed to have been back by lunchtime. And yeah, it was just a very long-winded day. But yeah, we had our bus ride, got back to the terminal, and went our separate ways. And that was the end of our travel day. So my overall thoughts of the trip, I would say, don't fly. If you're going from the UK, I always wondered what it would be like to fly, because usually I've only been on the Eurostar, and that can be a bit boring, but at least it's fairly straightforward. So yeah, the actual flying part was fine and it was quick, but the time either side and like having to arrive at the airport like 2 or 3 hours before your flight, and then all these hiccups we had, yeah, it's just put me off flying to France anyway. So if I were to go again, I would go on the Eurostar, I think. And at this point, I hope you've watched the other vlog videos of this series. Overall, we had a great time, even though watching back the videos, it does seem like we complained a lot. But yeah, so maybe it seems like we were really unhappy, but we weren't. We were having the time of our lives. One of the takeaways from this trip that I would implement into my future trips would be the Premier Access, which, yeah, it was a game changer. And definitely if you've got mobility issues, or you're getting a bit older like me, and yeah, you don't realise how hard it is to be on your feet all day when it's not something you're used to, which is definitely something I found this trip. Like, you start off okay and you're full of energy, but then as the day goes on, and then when you're there for multiple days, you're sort of starting off the day on already tired feet. So things like Premier Access, which means you can go and have a little sit down and wait for the ride rather than having to stand in a queue, yeah, definitely helped. It is quite an expense to add on to your trip, and particularly if you're like traveling with a family, I think it would make it very expensive having to pay for like you and your kids. But as a solo traveller, yeah, it's a bit more manageable. And like I said, if you do have any mobility issues, or you don't want to stand up all day, then it's worth thinking of sort of budgeting that into your trip. I think the price actually varies. I thought it was €90 a day, but the prices start from €90 a day. So I think throughout the year that can change. I don't know how high it would go up to. We were doing the pay per ride, which, yeah, looking back now, if I'd have known how many times we were going to use it, probably would have been easier for us just to get the like full one. But at the time we didn't realise. But if I went again, I would probably plan to just get the daily one to save like all the messing around. So a note on the hotel that we stayed at. We stayed at the, I always get the name wrong. We stayed at this Aparthotel Adagio Serris, I think is the name, which is just outside of the Disney area. I should have looked at it on a map really. so I could get my bearings. The hotel was fine. It was a little studio apartment, so I guess it would have been good if I was on maybe a longer trip where I needed to use the kitchen facilities, because it had that. So if I wasn't in the parks every day, I could have, like, I don't know, made food. The transport was good to the parks once we knew where to actually get the bus from. It wasn't particularly well signposted. Like, you thought they'd make it obvious that this is where the Disney bus goes from. And also the bus wasn't, like, branded at all to say it was the bus for Disney. It was just like a plain bus. But once we figured out where the bus stop was and which bus it was, that was easy enough. So yeah, I probably would stay at that hotel again. However, I'd prefer to stay in one of the Disney hotels, purely because of location, I guess, and being able to walk back to the hotel. Particularly on that final night when I was on my own, there was part of me that was a bit nervous about, like, oh, what if the bus doesn't come? Or what if I miss the bus and I'm stranded, and how am I going to get back to the hotel? And what if I get lost? Whereas if you're in one of the Disney hotels, you know where they are and you know how to get there, and they've all got, like, safe walking routes. So yeah, from that point of view, I would probably want to stay in a Disney one next time. Although as far as the room went, it was fine. So going back to the food, we ate everything sort of at Disney, basically. We didn't eat everything at Disney, but we ate our meals at Disney. And I'll probably do a separate video with my restaurant reviews. But yeah, I would say it's expensive, the food, which I kind of anticipated. It was useful to have some little snacks in my bag. So I had, like, some Belvita, like those cookie things, which I would usually eat for breakfast, and maybe like a bag of, like, crisps or a bag of cheddars, or a little energy bar, something like that is handy to carry with you, because sometimes if you're in a queue and you just fancy a little something, it's not always easy to get the food there because the queues are so long. But as I said, I'll review the food in another video. One thing that did kind of put a dampener on this trip was the building works that, looking back, they were everywhere. I didn't notice it so much at Magic Kingdom, although looking back at some of the videos, I do realise that there were areas in, like, Fantasyland that were closed off, and also along Main Street there was part of one of the shop fronts that were boarded off. I noticed it more in the Walt Disney Studios park. I'd known that was, like, being renovated, so I'd expected the closure of the big building at the beginning, but I didn't anticipate, like, all the boarding off, like, across the whole middle of the park, basically. So that had quite a big impact, and it did seem like only half the park was open there, and it just wasn't very magical to walk along all that boarding. So the building works had quite a big impact on our time at the studios, but they had the biggest impact on our time at Disney Village, which was just a disaster, really. We'd planned to do, like, the whole afternoon shopping there, and there was only 2 shops worth going in, and one of them had all the stuff that we'd already seen at the parks. So that really spoilt that last day, actually, particularly because we'd saved it till last. If I'd known about it earlier, then perhaps I wouldn't have been so disappointed, because I'd have just planned to not spend my time there. But because we'd come out of the park early, specifically to go to Disney Village. Yeah, finding it just all building site was very disappointing. So with all that said, if you were planning a trip to Disneyland Paris, I personally would recommend going in 2026 or after, because a lot of the stuff that they're working on now will then be open. So you might be able to find a cheap deal to go this year based on the fact that a lot of it is closed. But yeah, if you're planning to go, wait till the World of Frozen is open, because I think that's going to be really good. And that's happening in the Studios Park that's being renamed the Disney Adventure Park, I think. Probably should have checked that before I recorded. Disney, I don't know, we'll find out. So 2026 is when I'd like to go back to Disneyland Paris. Oh, I thought that was a postman back again. So at the moment I've got no more trips booked in, but I would like to go again, just got no money left. So watch this space. Oops, here you go, Missy. Are you waking up? Are you going to wake up and be in the video? Snoozing. She's snoozing. Oops. Ooh, Missy. And if you did watch the vlog series and you're a new subscriber or an old subscriber, thank you. It's nice for people to actually watch the videos. My YouTube videos have been quite hit and miss so far, so it was nice to see the Disney vlogs do well. Please give this video a like, and it will help it get seen by more people maybe, and I can continue to make them. The next one's going to be my haul video, which I did shoot ages ago, and yeah, I'll show you all the exciting things that I bought when I was on my trip. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. And if you're wondering why I've had this big cushion on my lap, it's because this jumper's so unflattering when I'm sitting down. Thanks, Mum. It was a lovely Christmas present.